The automatic door slid open as the black man stepped into the brightly lit, high-end retail store, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Dressed in a tailored navy suit with a subtle silk pocket square, he looked completely at ease, his eyes scanning the layout with a hint of familiarity. It was early afternoon, and the store was moderately busy, a couple browsing designer jackets, a teenager trying on sunglasses, a cashier chatting with a customer at the register. He made his way toward the luxury accessories section, his hand brushing lightly over a display of leather goods. As he reached for a premium briefcase on the top shelf, a store manager, a white woman in her mid-30s with a stiff expression and a clipboard, approached him with hurried steps. Her tone was clipped and tight, as if she had rehearsed it. "Excuse me, sir," she said, stepping directly into his space. "This section is for paying customers. We don't allow loitering, especially near high-value merchandise." He blinked, slightly taken aback, then slowly lowered the briefcase back onto the display. "I wasn't loitering," he said calmly. "I was just looking." Her eyes narrowed. "Yes, well, we've had issues before. I'm going to have to ask you to leave this area, or I'll be forced to call security." A few shoppers turned their heads at the rising tension. Two sales associates nearby froze mid-conversation, exchanging uncertain glances as they watched the interaction. One of them, a younger black employee, looked especially uncomfortable, his jaw tightening. The man stood straight, his voice still composed. "Is that how you treat all your customers?" The manager crossed her arms. "We have rules, and you're making other guests uncomfortable." He looked around, no one seemed visibly bothered, except the manager. The silence in the store thickened. But rather than arguing, the man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. "You might want to rethink what you just said," he told her, his tone calm but firm. "Because you're speaking to the owner of this store." The store fell into a tense, almost surreal silence as the man's words hung in the air, "Because you're speaking to the owner of this store." The manager's smirk faltered for a split second. She blinked, confused, then gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Nice try," she said, folding her arms tighter. "If you're trying to scare me, it's not going to work. I know the owner, and he doesn't just walk in off the street in the middle of the day, unannounced." He met her stare evenly, still holding his phone in one hand. "You know the name of the owner," he replied calmly. But clearly not his face. The manager opened her mouth to respond but was cut off by the chiming of the door. A tall woman in a sharp blazer, eyes sharp with urgency, swept into the store and scanned the room. Her eyes locked onto the man immediately, and her expression shifted to one of recognition and unease. "Mr. Bennett," she called, approaching quickly. "I came as soon as I got your call." Several employees stopped what they were doing entirely. One dropped a shirt they had been folding. Customers began whispering, casting side glances between the man and the manager. The young black sales associate looked visibly relieved. The manager's posture straightened. "Wait, Mr. Bennett. As in, yes," the executive cut in sharply. "The founder. The CEO." She turned to the manager, her face hardening. "What exactly happened here?" The manager's face had gone pale. Her voice faltered. I didn't recognize him. He didn't announce who he was. He looked like he didn't belong in that section, and..." "That section," the executive repeated, her voice cool and deadly calm. "You assumed a man wearing a suit and looking at briefcases didn't belong, because of what, exactly?" The silence was deafening. The manager looked between them, her confidence crumbling as the weight of what she'd done finally hit her. The man, Mr. Bennett, said nothing. He didn't need to. His quiet stare said enough. Customers had begun pretending to shop while keeping an eye on the unfolding scene. Phones weren't out yet, but the tension was thick with the potential of it. The store, once just another stop in someone's afternoon, had become the setting for something far bigger. And the storm wasn't over. The atmosphere in the store had shifted entirely. What began as a casual shopping trip had turned into a silent reckoning. Whispers rippled through the room like wind through tall grass. Employees stood frozen, unsure of what to say or do. Mr. Bennett stood with his phone still in hand, composed but firm, his presence now commanding full attention. The regional executive, Ms. Castillo, took a slow breath and stepped fully into the space between Mr. Bennett and the now visibly nervous store manager. She turned to him first, her tone respectful and apologetic. "Mr. Bennett, I sincerely apologize for this experience. This is unacceptable and does not reflect our values or training. I had no idea." He lifted a hand gently to stop her. "I appreciate your response, but I don't want words. I want to know if this is how my staff are treating our customers when I'm not around." Ms. Castillo's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll personally review the surveillance footage, retrain every employee if necessary, and handle this matter immediately." Her eyes then flicked to the manager, now clinging to her clipboard like a life vest. The manager tried to recover, speaking quickly. "Look, I just made a mistake, all right. I didn't know who he was. I've worked here for over 3 years and have never seen him before." Anyone could have made the same assumption. "That's exactly the problem, Ms. Castillo interrupted, her voice steel. "You assumed. You didn't ask, you didn't welcome him, you didn't treat him with basic respect. You profiled him, and in doing so, you disrespected the very man who signs your paychecks." The manager opened her mouth, but Ms. Castillo didn't let her speak again. "You're done here," she said flatly. "Clear out your things. Effective immediately." There was no dramatic shouting, no slamming of fists, just a crushing finality in those words. The store manager stood stunned, blinking as if trying to process what had just happened. "Wait, you're firing me? On the spot? For a misunderstanding?" Ms. Castillo's voice didn't waver. "Not for a misunderstanding. For a clear, repeated lack of judgment that could have cost this company its reputation. You're not just fired because of who he is. You're fired because this is who you are when you think no one's watching." The store was silent. One customer let out a quiet gasp. Another murmured, "Good," under their breath. Mr. Bennett simply turned away, adjusting the cuffs of his suit as he glanced around the store, his store. His expression was unreadable, but the message was clear. He didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. Respect is something you earn, and something you lose with a single choice. As the former manager stood frozen, her clipboard now hanging useless at her side, the reality of what had just occurred settled over the store like a heavy fog. Her mouth opened once more, maybe to defend herself, maybe to plead, but no sound came. Ms. Castillo had already turned away from her, dismissing her with a cold finality that left no room for argument. The silence wasn't just awkward anymore, it was crushing. Mr. Bennett glanced around the store, his eyes moving across each employee, each customer. Most looked away when their gaze met his, not out of shame, but out of respect. The young black sales associate, who had watched the entire scene unfold with a tense jaw and clenched fists, caught Mr. Bennett's eye. He gave a small, grateful nod. Mr. Bennett returned it with the faintest smile, just a flicker, but it spoke volumes. Without saying a word, Mr. Bennett turned and began walking toward the exit, his stride slow and deliberate. His shoes echoed softly against the floor as the automatic doors parted ahead of him. For a moment, it was as though the entire store held its breath. Just before stepping out, he paused. He looked back over his shoulder, not at the fired manager, not at the stunned customers, but at the staff. "Let this be a reminder," he said quietly, but with unmistakable authority, "that we're in the business of serving people, not judging them. That includes everyone who walks through those doors." No one responded. They didn't need to. With that, Mr. Bennett stepped outside into the sunlight. The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss. A second later, life in the store seemed to restart. Customers resumed browsing, albeit more quietly. Employees moved again, some murmuring among themselves. The young sales associate exhaled deeply, as though he'd been holding his breath for the past 10 minutes. Ms. Castillo remained in place for a moment, then turned to the rest of the team. "Back to work," she said, her voice firm but laced with reflection. "We've got a lot to talk about before the end of the day." Outside, Mr. Bennett walked slowly down the sidewalk, phone in his pocket, expression unreadable. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The message had been delivered, not with rage, but with quiet, immovable power. And the store would never be the same again.